Welcome, everybody. We got a lot of people joining us here. That's wonderful to see so many of you. Well, we can't see you, but we know you're there. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. But I think it's our mission to make sure this is super valuable. And what are we talking about here today? The 2024 elections and what you need to know to protect your assets. And I think you can probably, if you're joining us, I want you to take a moment to think about why you're here. What got you to join us here today? And I would bet that it's some feeling like of worry or confusion, or maybe you feel overwhelmed. Are you just exhausted by politics? I mean, I feel a little exhausted, no matter which side you're on. And you want to just save what you've worked so hard for your entire life. That's a pretty reasonable thing to want to do. And that's what this is about. The information that we're going to go over here today could be worth, and we're not exaggerating here, we're going to show you the numbers. It could be worth millions of dollars to you, your family, your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. Taking a few actions now can have an extraordinary impact on your life. And I always like to lead with how to frame this. We're going to throw a lot of information at you. You don't need to get all the details, other than maybe some deadlines that you need to be aware of. But I'm sure many of you have been through crises in your life. I've been through my own cancer journey 5 years ago. My wife has been through a cancer journey. When you go through a crisis, you have to focus in on what really matters. You have to let go of the noise and focus on what do I need to do right now to make sure everything's going to be okay. You have to control what you can control. And I think there's three concepts that I want you to take away from this talk. And they're relatively simple. They are control. So one, hope is not a strategy. I was a management consultant before I was a lawyer. Hope for things to turn out okay is not a strategy. Two, in this context especially, never rely on voters or politicians to improve your tax situation or to bail you out from a bad tax hit or legislative hit. Don't rely on them. And the last part, this is the most important, control what you can control. This is when you go through a crisis in life. I'm sure many of you watching this have been through crises. You have to get that razor sharp focus on what you can control. We can, of course, help when it comes to estate and gift tax and estate planning, but control what you can control. And just before we jump in, one last point here. I think this is really summed up in the Serenity Prayer. Anybody familiar with the Serenity Prayer? Whether you're religious or not, I think it's beautiful and it's really simple. It is, God or Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that is just a good philosophy for life, again, whether you're religious or not. And I think it's good to think about that in terms of estate planning, to make this a little bit corny, not to make everything about estate planning, but we have to really focus on what we can do. And there's a lot more that you can do than you probably think. So let's jump into some slides. And let's talk about the little election that's coming up. Anybody following? Anybody hear any news about this election? Here's the latest polls. Mike, do you want to talk about the latest polls? I mean, we're not here, we're not prognosticators. Let's just say this was a screenshot from yesterday from, I think it was like 538.com. The polls are all over the place. It looks right now like maybe the Senate will be Republican. Right now, it looks like the Congress is leaning Democrat in the presidential election. Who knows? It's all over the place because we have the popular vote, the Electoral College. It's changing on a daily basis. It's already been the craziest election we can remember, and a swapping out of candidates, only one debate, that might be it. So we can't predict what will happen. We're not going to try to. And this is a nonpartisan presentation, by the way. We are not here to take sides. We're here to simply present facts. That's a really important concept. So, Mike, please lead us through the concepts we're going to go over today and what we're going to talk about.
Sure. So this would be something of a summary or a table of contents for how we're going to spend about an hour with everybody. So overview, what are the proposals? We'll certainly talk about what the law is today, but what are the proposals from the Harris camp and from the Trump camp as best as we can determine? What will be the possible impact depending on who is elected, which party takes which branch of government? So we have three scenarios we'll share with you, and we have our own cautious prognostication about what we think is a little more likely than not to happen. Certainly, we're going to talk about what we call the cliff, the dramatic change in the estate tax rules that will happen on January 1, 2026, unless we have new law. California propositions, there's so many. We're just going to focus in on two. Mark will talk about one dealing with rent control. I'm going to revisit Prop 19, which we always have to keep an eye on. We talk so much about state and federal tax issues. California taxes are not irrelevant. So we'll talk about the one that we think is most important to just keep in mind these days. Action steps. What are the things you should consider doing? What are the deadlines? What should your timing be as you look at your family and your planning? And I'll reemphasize, nonpartisan. We're just trying to look objectively at what's going on and give you a good analysis and some advice about going forward. This is educational. This is not specific legal advice to anybody. We're not sitting down with you right now. We hope to do that in the future. But again, for educational purposes only.
Absolutely. So now just about us. I think most of you here maybe know us, but for those of you who don't, we're part of Gilfix and the Poll Associates. It's not just Mike and I. We have a number of amazing other attorneys. We have Francis LaPole, our tax guru, Nick Klingenberg, Renee Conrad, Amanda Wynn. We have an amazing team, and we're always trying to grow it. But just about us, we've been around for over 40 years, and we are a multi-generational team, as you can kind of see on the screen. We have served thousands of families throughout California. We've educated hundreds of thousands of families, both on YouTube, online, on TV, and the newspapers. Mike's had a regular column in the Los Altos Town Crier. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today. We've been on TV. He's a regular contributor to Bottom Line Personal Magazine, Bottom Line Inc. We're both published in Trusts and Estates magazines. We're out there, and our YouTube channel reaches hundreds of thousands of people. And our goal is to provide extraordinary value and peace of mind and return on investment. We view estate tax planning and estate planning as an investment. Don't think of it as just something to purely check the box on. If you think about it the right way, it is truly extraordinary what we can achieve. So we're very proud of our heritage. We serve people throughout the state of California. So no matter where you're watching this, if you're in the state of California, we can help you. From San Diego to Wairika, we can work with you. We do work with people throughout the state via Zoom or in person. So, Mike, talk about the current laws and what we need to be aware of right now, because I think that's an important baseline so we can understand where things might be going.
Right. So obviously we're selecting current tax laws that we think are more important. We could spend a few days going through all the current tax laws. We're not going to do that.
No one wants that.
So again, we're selecting the issues that we think are topical for us to be thinking about in the context of current planning. Okay. First is what we have we have the estate tax. If you have too much in your estate, so to speak, everything over a certain amount is taxed. And the current level of exemption or protection is very high, $13.61 million per person. Like $27 million for a couple. So very few are affected by this. It is a 40% tax. Everything over the protected limit is taxed at the very high rate of 40%. But then there's proposals that would make it even higher. But this is current law. We currently have the annual exclusion, which many folks still think of as a $10,000 opportunity to make gifts. It's increased annually for a number of years. This year it's $18,000. That's the number of dollars you can give away to any number of people. You don't report it. The receipt of that gift, not a taxable event. That's current law. Cost basis and step up. If you bought a share of stock for $10 and now it's worth $30, if you sell it right now, you'd have a $20 profit or capital gain. That's capital gains tax. If that stock is in your estate when you pass away, the basis goes up to reflect the market value. It's a very important point for avoiding capital gains tax. So currently, everything in your estate gets this thing called the stepped up basis. There are no capital gains taxes imposed at your passing. Capital gains are only imposed when an asset is sold under current law. There are countless strategies available. We use the term discount. We'll go through some examples a little bit later on, but there are many alternatives and opportunities to take planning steps that can actually make a portion of your estate effectively disappear for estate tax purposes. Very powerful when used appropriately. Prop 19, well, that's where we have these massive property tax increases that happen when there's a transition in ownership, most typically when the owner, mom or dad, pass away and the house goes to the kids. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but Prop 19 is current law. It is a challenge that we have to keep thinking about as we go forward.
Yes, we're not talking really about income taxes much. I mean, capital gains taxes relate to income taxes. We are not income tax people other than how they connect to your estate planning. So this is not meant to address all of that, but yeah, right now, and I think historically speaking, if we were to put this in the context of where estate and gift tax laws have been over the last 20, 30, 40 years, we're probably at an amazingly positive place in that you can pass more to your loved ones than you could historically. Pretty much at any point in history other than 2010, was it, when there was no estate
2010.
tax?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the point is we have very favorable laws right now, but they're, when it comes to passing assets within family, preserving assets, they're not going to change. We cannot count on them continuing. That's the main point. So now let's get into something that's really not, not controversial at all. Let's talk about something we love to talk about, partisan politics and presidential candidates and their respective proposals. So what are we talking about here? Let's share the differences between the two candidates that I'm sure you're familiar with, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Where are we? What are they proposing? Again, this is not a complete analysis of everything. We're just trying to take some highlights in areas that we think you need to be up to speed. So let's start with Ms. Harris and her key proposals. So Vice President Harris has basically signed on with the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act of 2024. So the Vice President has put this out as her proposal. And income tax, again, we're not really focused on income taxes, but just at a high level, there's talk of increasing the individual tax rate for high earners over $400,000 or couples over $450,000 of income to increase that to almost 40%. And there's a talk, and we talk about 1031 exchanges in some of our other presentations. There is talk of, or a proposal to limit tax-free exchanges to a $500,000 gain. So right now you can do 1031 exchanges no matter how big a gain is, as long as you follow the 1031 exchange steps, you can avoid capital gains taxes. That might hurt. The vice president's proposal is to limit that to $500,000 in gains. But now let's transition to her estate and gift tax proposals. And these are just proposals. We'll talk about why proposals are not always, you can't always rely on those. So there is talk of imposing a capital gains tax upon passing. So again, just proposals, but there's an idea of taxing unrealized gains, capital gains at death above a $5 million exemption per person. So right now you could have $50 million in capital gains. Now there's a separate estate tax issue, but that is all wiped away. Your family does not have to pay any capital gains taxes. Your kids would inherit with no capital gains tax exposure. Here, if you have a gain in your entire estate of over $5 million, there would be a capital gains tax bill due. The annual gift exemption, right now it's $18,000 per person. You can give it to as many people as you want. You can give $18,000 gifts to 20 different people. There's a proposal to lower that to $10,000 per person and to limit it to 2 people. So you can only give away $20,000 per year tax-free. The estate tax exemption, this is probably the biggest thing that we're keeping an eye on. The proposal from Vice President Harris is to lower that from where it's currently $13.61 million. It's $10 million indexed with inflation going back a few years to $3.5 million per person. So a dramatic drop in the estate tax exemption. And that, if you own a house in many parts of California, that house alone could expose you to estate taxes if the exemption is dropped to $3.5 million. And the estate tax rate is currently 40%. It's flat, 40%, whether you have $1 billion exposed or $1 million exposed, there's a 40% tax from that. And Vice President Harris has proposed increasing that to 55% for the first $13 million exposed, 60% for the next tier up to $93 million, and a 65% tax for estates with taxable assets of $93 million or more. So a dramatic increase in the estate tax rate and a dramatic decrease in the amount that you can pass to your children or grandchildren or loved ones. And Mike talked a little bit, we've talked in many other presentations about discounting and different strategies that we can use to dramatically reduce estate tax exposure. And part of Vice President Harris's proposals, she's proposing to eliminate a lot of those tools. So to basically say you cannot do discounting anymore. You cannot create defective grantor trust. So don't worry about the details, but a lot of the strategies that we can totally legally use right now may become disallowed if these proposals were to pass. So from an estate tax planning and estate planning perspective, we got to be aware of this because this could be coming. We don't know. We'll talk about different scenarios in a moment. And Mike, why don't you lead us through former President Donald Trump's proposals and what he's saying or not saying?
So there isn't really a whole lot that has been said. He's been talking about the issues, but more around the issues, the things that we think are more likely than not. We do have this termination of the current tax laws that would happen at the end of 2025. So at minimum, he would seek, we believe, to extend the current law, which means it would continue to be indexed upwardly. continuing what is now the 13.61 million, it would go to 14 and upward from there, extending the current law rather than having it sunset at the end of 2025. The cliff wouldn't happen as a result of that, if that were the case. As significantly, no envisioned changes have been recommended with regard to the tools that Mark alluded to. There's GRATs, there's irrevocable trust, there's discounting. There's so many tools and techniques. Later, we'll give a screenshot of the book that we author that summarizes all of these tools and techniques. So none of those would be eroded from any current proposals that have been made by the Trump campaign.
All right. So now I think let's go through some scenario planning. So let's go through three possible outcomes of the federal elections and what they would mean for you and your family when it comes to estate and gift tax planning. So I think a really important point is just because a candidate proposes tax changes does not mean they're going to become law. I think former President Obama had many proposals that never became law. He was president for 8 years. And why is that? Well, because of our system of governance. You need a law to change. It has to pass the Congress, it has to pass the Senate, and it has to be signed by the president. So if any one of those three is not like the other, it is very unlikely that laws change. Right. And I think very importantly, when it comes to estate and gift tax planning, if there's gridlock, the current law, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, it sunsets at the end of 2025. And so if there's no change, the current law sunsets, and we'll talk about what that would mean. But I think that's important to understand. So I think, again, one party has to control all three branches for there to be a change in law or for things to change in a dramatic way. So these proposals are just proposals. But they're not going to happen unless the president has the Congress and the Senate on their side as well. So let's talk about the three different scenarios. And Mike, I'll talk about one possibility. So let's say that the GOP, the Republican Party, sweeps, that Donald Trump wins the presidency, the GOP retains control of the Senate and maintains control of Congress. And at the time of this presentation, who knows about the presidency? It looks slightly more likely, from what I've seen, that the GOP will control the Senate. Congress looks like it's leaning Democrat. Who knows? So if the GOP sweeps, that means that Donald Trump's ideas have a much higher likelihood of being enacted into law. And the most likely thing here is that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act will be extended and either made permanent or just extended for a number of years. I'm not an expert on the nuances there. But what does that mean? It means that this 2026 cliff, the December 31st, 2025, January 1st, 2026 cliff, when the estate tax exemption is without a change in law, it's set to drop by 50% from 10 million indexed to inflation to 5 million indexed to inflation. If the GOP sweeps, we believe that they will at least extend the current law, meaning there will be no cliff. That the same scenario that we're at now, the same rules that we're at now will continue. So we'll talk about some of the numbers again, but that's probably the most likely outcome. Now, just to be clear, though, even if the GOP wins all three branches, this presidency, the Senate, and the Congress, that doesn't mean they'll get their act together to pass a new law or to extend this. We've seen a lot of dysfunction even within the Republican Party. You have the Freedom Caucus and the more moderates, and there's a lot of party infighting. So they would need to all be completely unified to do this. Now, in Donald Trump's first term, they did get unified, and they had a slight majority everywhere, and they did pass the new law. So that's a very real possibility. If Republicans win all three, maybe there won't even be a 2026 cliff, and we won't have these urgent deadlines, although we still might. Mike, walk us through what would another scenario with the Democrats winning all three branches.
So what if Vice President Harris becomes president and the Democrats control, at least nominally, the Senate and the House? What would be the logical outcomes? At minimum, the current law will be allowed to terminate. The cliff will happen. So that's at minimum. We summarized the other proposals that would much more dramatically limit opportunities to avoid the estate tax. So those proposals will likely see the light of day. Whether they would be acted upon ever or quickly, Mark's already correctly pointed out that you just never know. I mean, you look at the infighting in the two parties, and it's hard to imagine agreement on virtually anything. And something I've always noted about tax rules and tax laws, every member of Congress is a built-in lobbyist, right? he or
Yeah.
she has a family, they have assets. So they're thinking about themselves too. So would there be unanimity on the part of the Democratic Party to pass some of these proposals that have been put on the table by the campaign? I just don't know. I have to point out there has been some discussion, although it's not been paramount, that there could even be legislation proposed that would make the changes retroactive to like January 1, 2025. That would take very quick action by the Senate and by the House, and the president would have to be very proactive. But that means that some of the opportunities could disappear even sooner than the cliff that we're worried about at the very end of 2025. We don't really see that. I mean, again, the challenges there, the details that would have to be addressed, the herding of the cats, which within the Senate and the House, very hard to imagine, but it could happen. It could happen.
And yeah, and I think it's important to point out that for Biden's first 2 years, he did have a Democratic Senate and Democratic Congress, and they did not pass a tax reform bill. They did not change the current rules. So just even if Democrats control all three branches, that's absolutely no guarantee, as Mike said, that things will change. But the flip side, as he pointed out, we might have a deadline coming up a lot sooner than we think. So we can't predict that, but we can at least be prepared as best we can. So now let's talk about what, again, this is not a total prediction, but what I think is probably most likely, and that is a split. So what if Democrats win the presidency and the Congress, but Republicans control the Senate, or Republicans control the presidency and Democrats control the other two branches? Just some sort of split. And I think right now, if you look at polls and prognostications, that is the most likely outcome, that it looks like the Senate is going Republican, Congress going Democrat, and who knows, presidential. But let's just say this happens. No party wins control. Well, gridlock is guaranteed. I'm probably most confident about. If there's a split, there will be gridlock. And what does gridlock means? It means no new laws are passed, which means the current law sunsets as it is expected to do. And what does that mean from an estate and gift tax standpoint? It means we have this critical deadline coming up on December 31st, 2025, where the estate tax exemption drops. The current law sunsets, it's over, it reverts to the prior law, meaning the estate tax exemption goes down by 50%, and it is a use it or lose it scenario. So I think that's a concept we've talked a little bit about in past presentations, but the way the law is right now is if you take actions when the exemption's higher and you take advantage of the bigger numbers, it is very unlikely that there will be retroactive changes to nail you. That's never really happened historically. In theory, it could. The IRS always had the legislative branch has the ability to do that, but they never have historically. But if you don't take advantage of the full amount or a large amount, you lose that opportunity forever. So the most likely scenario is that we do have this January 1st or December 31st, 2025 deadline and this cliff where the state and gift tax exemption will plummet. So we're going to go over this again, but what are some actions to take right now? I think one, just don't wait till the last minute. That's the biggest thing. Changes are almost certain to come. We'll obviously know a lot more in November 6th or 7th. But there are many strategies that we can deploy before these opportunities may be lost. There's a lot we can do, and it is a multi-million-dollar issue for many families. Even if you don't consider yourself high net worth or wealthy, just owning real estate in California, owning a home in the Bay Area or LA or Orange County or San Diego might put you close to the new limits, especially if you're single and not married. Because it's 13.61 million per person. So that's doubled if you're married, but if you're not, it's just you don't get one of those exemptions. So that's the federal. We'll talk a little bit more about some tools that we can use, but let's transition now. The 2024 California elections, what are we watching? And we're watching what is on the ballot, but I think it's also important to point out what's not on the ballot. And talk a little bit more about that. That's, in our view, that's almost just as important as what is on the ballot. But we're not going over every proposition on the California ballot. If you're California citizens, those of you watching, we know how broken our system is. Like, why are voters voting on these complex, nuanced tax issues? That should be the job of the legislature. But hey, it's California. We're special. We vote on everything. So let's go through one proposition we are keeping a close eye on. This doesn't directly relate to estate planning, but we think it can have huge implications for the value of family assets. So Prop 33 is called the Justice for Renters Act, and it is basically, in plain English, would give cities the ability to expand rent control. So current law in California is governed by the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995. And what Costa-Hawkins did is it eliminated the ability of local California cities to impose rent control on single family homes, on condos, and on apartment buildings built in 1995 or later. I'm not sure the exact date. And the idea is you should be able to rent your home out and not worry about not increasing rents. It shouldn't be too hard to move back in if you want to. And they wanted to encourage new housing to be built in California because developers don't typically want to build a very expensive housing project if they are worried that rent control could be imposed, making it not feasible. So this would eliminate those protections and it would allow cities, not all, but it'd be up to the cities to impose rent control on single family homes. And I think this is actually kind of timely. I put an image of an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. So Argentina had a broken housing system. They got rid of rent controls and all of a sudden the supply expanded dramatically. So, I think if you talk to any economist, they would say rent control, it helps a small group of people. It hurts many more. Don't mean to get too much into the politics, but just from an economic standpoint, I've never really understood how this is supposed to help the general community. But hey, it is what it is. And there have been attempts, or like 2 attempts in the last few years to eliminate rent control. They have both failed. So who knows? I don't think this is likely to pass, but it could. So just be aware, Prop 33, if it passes and you ever want to rent your home out, depending on where you are, they might impose rent control. San Francisco, of course, has already announced, a lot of the political leaders there have said, we're immediately going to impose rent control on single family homes if this passes. And there could even be vacancy controls where if you have a tenant move out, you might not even be able to increase rents then. So you might be locked at very, very low rents for decades if you want to rent a house out. But here's the problem. We also have another law called Prop 19 in California that we're really worried about. So assume this passes and you can only increase rents if you want to rent out your condo or your single family home by 2 or 3% per year. Let's say it goes to your kids and they want to rent it out. Maybe they won't be able to increase rents. But what's not on the ballot? Prop 19 will not be overturned in the next couple of years because there is no repeal of Prop 19 on the ballot. There's been attempts for the last 2 elections. They come out well short. But what does this mean? We have a lot of videos about this. If you watch our YouTube channel, you've seen it. If you come to talk to us, we talk about this all the time. But Prop 19 dramatically limits the ability to pass real estate from one generation to the next without a massive increase in property taxes. Mike, can you give us a quick summary of what that means?
Sure. There's 2 aspects. There's the treatment of the family home, the residence, and then all other real property. So what Prop 19 does is it pretty much eliminates the legacy of Prop 13, hallowed Prop 13, that most people in California, the more they know about it, the more they love it because it protects property taxes at a very low level. Well, that's been wiped out for inherited assets. So let's assume first that you own a second home, a rental, a vacation home, a business property, whatever it may be. If that property is passed along to your kids and you want them to retain ownership, it is unavoidable, there will be a reassessment to reflect the market value on the date of death.
I have to push back. It is not unavoidable. If you work with us, it's avoidable, but sorry.
Well, I think I was going to make that point in just a moment. Who knows? Who knows? But under the law, unless you are proactive and take steps, it will be reassessed. So simple example, you bought a piece of property decades ago at Tahoe. You paid $200,000 in property taxes are $100,000. You're paying maybe property taxes of $8,000-$10,000 a year. That property is now worth $3 million. That property is going to be reassessed, and property taxes are going to go to like $33,000 a year. I mean, it's a massive increase. It makes it untenable for family members to retain ownership for rental properties, for vacation homes. So it is a massive problem. And you have to just understand that it's waiting in the wings to assault virtually every family that owns property. Okay. And then the residents, that's the second treatment. Different slightly. There's been some misinformation to the effect that if your child makes your residence her residence, that there'll be no property tax increase. And that is true only if the property is of relatively low value. The law is that if your child makes your residence her residence, the first $1 million in assessed value is forgiven, but only $1 million. So let's go to my example in Tahoe, and let's say that that's the family home. So now we're at $3 million. If the child makes your residence her residence, moves into that house at Tahoe, and takes all the appropriate steps, and there are many steps that have to be taken, the first $1 million is forgiven. So if it's worth $3 million, the new assessed value would be $2 million, and property taxes would more than double. They'd still go to about $22,000 a year. Again, untenable for so many people, which explains, by the way, why the vast bulk of the money that supported the passage of Prop 19 came from the Realtors Association, because this stimulates folks who feel they have no choice to sell property that they otherwise wanted to retain.
And
so,
one quick note, it actually was increased a little bit above 1 million. They adjusted it with inflation. It's like 1.01 million you can protect now, but that's an aside. For most of you, that's not going to make a big difference.
So I got to say, I mean, there's so many nuances here. We're dealing with round numbers, just to keep it understandable as we possibly can. And Mark laid out a couple of maxims, like hope is not a plan. Another one here, by the way, is don't be logical. Don't just think that logic is going to take you anywhere. You have to look at what the law is, logical or illogical, deal with it directly, and identify the options that can help you address it. So let's be really clear that there are solutions. So the point that Mark started to make and that I emphasize is we can take steps. We can implement a plan to lock in and retain the current low level of property taxes by being proactive. Now, think about this. If your property taxes are now $5,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 a year, and because of the value of your real property, they'd go up to $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. The savings, if we can lock in those low property taxes, are massive over time, millions of dollars in so many circumstances.
Well, and it could be the difference between letting your child stay in the community and not. We have many clients who, their house is worth a lot, but their daughter is a school teacher. And there is no way in this planet where their children, unless they're tech executives, can afford these types of massive increases in property tax. And we've been able to save houses for many families. Let's just give an example of this, because I think this is just as big an issue as state tax issue for many families in California. This is the tax issue that we're worried about. And here's just an example. Let's say that you have a home worth $3.3 million, and in many parts of California, that's not even that big a house. You have an assessed value of $300,000, and you're currently paying $3,300 per year in taxes. Without preventing a tax increase, your children could face a 1-year increase of over $33,000 a year. Over 10 years, that's over $360,000 in extra taxes. Over 30 years, that's almost $1.34 million in extra property taxes they would have to pay. But the good thing is when you pay more property taxes, you get much better government services, right? Like the cops come to your house faster, you get better No, you get nothing. You get literally no better services. You can look at taxes in whatever philosophical way you want, but it's basically money that just goes out the door. And I think the key point here is whether it's your primary residence or not, you could face a massive increase, and we can fix this. So we've worked with hundreds of families in California to save their homes and to save their properties to keep them in the family. And I talked about that rent control measure. Like imagine a future where Prop 33 is approved and a city imposes rent control. So your kids maybe want to rent the house out, maybe they want to move in later. They can't increase rents by over 2 or 3% a year, but their property taxes go up by 3,000%. I mean, where do you go there? So we're really worried about the impact that might have on many middle-class families who just want to hold on to their houses. We can help.
In other videos that we've done, we lay out our many reasons why we believe that Prop 19 is not going away. Initiatives to get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, they've been unsuccessful. There are many forces at work that will want to maintain and grow the impact of Prop 19. So it's not going. Remember, hope is not a plan. Hoping it'll go away is definitely not a plan.
Okay, let's sum this up, because I think we talked about a lot of different issues, but what can you do? What should you do right now to protect your family assets? And we do have these deadlines coming up. So, it's nice to know about all these problematic things, but it wouldn't be very useful if we're just like, here's the problem. Sorry, it is what it is. Because it's not. What can you do to protect your hard-earned assets and your legacy and keep your family safe in a very unsafe and crazy world? So first off, I think it's important to point out that we wrote a book on this. So Mike wrote Beat Estate Tax Forever a couple of years ago. He and I are about to publish an updated version of that with some new numbers, some new issues. But our existing book, if you have that, the numbers are changing, but the concepts I think are largely still the same. But we do have an update coming, so look out for that. I will be a co-author on this new version. I'm very proud to say. Beat Estate Tax Forever. So we think about this a lot. We have a book about that. The book is an overview, though. You can't read the book and do it all yourself. I think it's really important to reframe estate tax planning as an investment. Because I think, you're watching this, maybe you're not in this category, but a lot of people are like, I don't want to work with lawyers. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay. They charge too much, they're annoying. That is, in our view, obviously, an idiotic mindset. Investing with a good team of advisors, it can be one of the best investments you will ever make. And you have to look at it in terms of return on investment. It's so funny, human psychology. We're so wired to want to increase gains, and we don't always value how powerful it is to avoid losses. In some ways, we like to avoid losses, but when it comes to tax planning like this, we have to invest a bit to save. I think a lot of people have it all backwards. Like, oh, I can invest in the stock. Maybe I'll make, 50% return. There are no guarantees in investing. Estate tax planning is one of the few areas where we can actually show pretty concrete numbers of how, hey, spending 10,000, 50,000, 100, whatever it is, can save you X million for multiple generations. So reframe it that way. A penny saved is a penny earned. Most taxes you pay come after you've already paid income tax on them, by the way. So it's almost like a double. If you can save money, that's the equivalent of earning more. If you can save $50,000 in taxes in many cases, that's actually the equivalent of earning $80,000 or $90,000 because you have to pay income tax on that. So just reframe that. And what are some steps you should take right now? Well, I think you got to make sure your foundation is right, that you have a very good estate plan. We've helped so many families with this. I mean, this is core to our practice. You don't have to be high net worth to work with. We work with middle-class families all over the state. But you need to make sure that your core estate and your living trust, your power of attorney, your advance directive, they're all up to date. You have the right people named. Do you have the right structure if you're married? Do you have an AB trust or a non-AB trust? Do you even know what that term is? That's okay if you don't. But as tax laws change, the structure of your living trust by itself could have a 6 or 7 figure impact on taxes. Do you put protections in for your kids? Do they have family protection trust or dynasty trust? We don't think you should leave anything to your kids. You should instead set up dynasty trusts, or as we call them, family protection trusts, for each of them to protect them from divorce, to provide protection against lawsuits and future estate taxes. And we talked about Prop 19. Have you protected your house, or are you worried about preserving your house for future generations? We can help with all of that. So who needs to be worried about this? Let's just go through some basic numbers. So if you are single and you have an estate of $6 million or more, you need to at least explore these issues. And as your estate gets bigger, it becomes more of a certainty that you need to worry about this. And if you're a couple and your estate is worth, let's say 12 million or more, you need to be worried about this, because these are the areas where we know it's a virtual certainty you're going to be impacted. And we have this major deadline, December 31st, 2025. Could even be sooner, depending on the election outcome. And the big thing is, talk to us. There's no one size fits all solution. There's no do this and you're good. There are so many different solutions, and every family is different. You might choose, some of our high net worth clients choose not to take big steps because they're like, I don't want to do this now. And many people are proactively planning right now before these deadlines get close. But don't wait. We will get booked up. If these deadlines are coming and we think they are, we will not have capacity to meet with everyone we need to meet with. So set meetings sooner rather than later. Start the process. Let's go through a couple examples of estate tax planning steps that we can take. So who here has seen Shawshank Redemption? I don't know if you've seen, this scene is very memorable. It's one of my favorite movies. It's classically, many people, I think we relate to Shawshank Redemption as their favorite movie. I love Shawshank Redemption. There's a famous scene where the evil cop is holding Andy Dufresne, the protagonist of the movie. Andy Dufresne says, "Do you trust your wife?" And he says, "What are you saying? Do you trust your wife?" says Andy Dufresne. And the prison guard grabs him. He says, "What are you saying about my wife?" And he holds him over the edge of the building. He's about to strangle him and throw him off the building. And Andy Dufresne then continues to talk about a tax planning strategy because he's an accountant. And that's how he kind of gets on the guard's good side. Minor spoiler, not really. What does that mean? Why am I bringing up the Shawshank Redemption? Well, Mike, why don't you talk about the spousal lifetime exemption trust? Because do you trust your wife or your husband? If you do, this is one of many powerful tools we might use. So, Mike, why don't you talk about the SLAT?
The SLAT. So let's emphasize, as Mark said, this is not the thing to do. This is one of the key elements in the arsenal, one of the best options available for those with larger estates. It works. Okay, the idea here is one spouse creates an irrevocable trust for the benefit of the other spouse. So let's say the husband does this. Husband takes up to $13.61 million worth of assets and transfers them into this trust. When that step is taken, a gift tax return is filed. The statement is made to the IRS that I gave this money away. I'm using my lifetime exemption and protection, and I'm getting all of that money out of my estate. Obviously, we're doing this before the law changes and before the level of protection goes down to about $7 million. Remember, it's use it or lose it. If you don't do this before the law changes, you can only take this step with about $7 million rather than 13.61. So the money is removed from the husband's estate, and the trust is structured in such a way so that it's not in the wife's estate either. Yes, that can be done. Upon her passing, it travels into dynasty trust planning, so it's not going to be in the estate of the kids either. So we're removing assets valued at 13.61. Any future growth in the value of those assets, well, it's not in the husband's estate and it's not in the wife's estate. So all of that growth that would otherwise be exposed to the 40% estate tax, it's removed from the estate and it's safe for the next generations. Powerful, powerful planning tool.
Yeah, it requires 2 steps of trust, by the way. The wife would have to transmute enough to make the husband separate property first. He can then do whatever he wants with it. And then the husband puts in the trust for the wife. She could leave and go off to Tahiti and he has no claim over it. It really has to be separated and then given to one spouse and then to the other. So do you trust your wife? I go back to that. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. But this actually raises a point. There was a lawsuit relatively recently where a very wealthy family took a number of steps that were irrevocable. They were very powerful from a tax planning perspective. And then months later, they said, wait a minute, we didn't know we lost control. Now, it was explained to them, but they had what we call buyer's remorse. They kind of regretted what they did because they gave up control. So these are issues to think through. And that's why so much of the work we do, we feel like we're psychologists as well as attorneys as we do this kind of planning. You have to be really aware of the implications of any steps that you take. But from an asset protection perspective, protecting assets for the family, these are win-win opportunities. And again, the SLAT is one of the most powerful steps you can take, not the only. There are many, many other steps, some of which we'll allude to just a little bit later.
Yeah, let's actually go into one other example just to show concepts. And again, our book goes through this, and there's no one size fits all. But here's another example where you can give away assets, keep control and income, but give up ownership. And this gets very esoteric, and a lot of it's not logical. Some of it is, but we talked about like discounting. So one other strategy we use with many of our clients is, let's say Sally has $14 million in assets. She could face over $2.8 million in estate tax exposure if she doesn't do anything right now. Well, she can create an LLC. This is just one example. Use the LLC to shift assets, but keep control in an income stream as the manager of that LLC. So how can she do this? Well, she could let's say she has 2 kids. She transfers ownership of the LLC to Family Protection Trust for her kids, but she keeps control. So that allows us to discount the value of that gift because there's a difference in the kids' trusts own it, but mom still controls it. There's nuances here. So or maybe it's not mom, maybe it's someone else, but you can get a discount. If there's a difference in ownership and control, the IRS allows you to discount the value of assets transferred. So it can be a discount of up to 20%. So we can discount $14 million to $11.2 million gift. And the growth is out of her estate. Again, the numbers, don't worry about them too much, but she can remove growth from her estate. She can get a discount. There are ways we can do this where a parent can still get some income as a manager of the LLC because they've given up control. But lots of issues here. We have to weigh control. We have to get capital gains taxes, estate taxes. But there are ways we can save truly millions. And this isn't it. There are a lot of other tools. This is not intended to go through these in too much detail, but here's an overview. And Mike, walk us through just the other ideas that we can
Let's
use.
just look at a couple of others. In our book, by the way, I think it's chapter 11 that goes through 8, 9, 10, 11 strategies that are available. So let's just pick a couple of them here and just mention them quickly. Charitable giving, charitable remainder trust, a sophisticated way of giving assets away, removing them from your taxable estate, and still having income coming back to you. Life insurance trust. If you own a life insurance policy worth $1 million, that $1 million is part of your taxable estate. If it's structured instead so that an irrevocable life insurance trust owns that life insurance policy, that $1 million is not in your estate. So there's a difference of $400,000 right there for folks with larger estates. There's GRATs, there's personal residence trusts that allow us to do very dramatic discounting. And remember, in this example, we're talking about discounting. Mark did just a moment ago. That is one of the proposals, one of the opportunities that would be eliminated under the very broad statements from one presidential candidate. But who knows? And again, she's got that laundry list of planning. If anything were to happen, logically, history would tell us that maybe some of those would pass, not all of them. Yeah. So there's going to be opportunities available. So many. No time to go through them all right now, but sophisticated charitable giving, taking advantage of discounting, realizing how all these tax rules interplay, Prop 19, capital gains tax, estate tax, gift tax, you have to coordinate all of those steps, which we can do,
Absolutely. So we've thrown a lot at you. Your head may
A
be
lot.
spinning, probably is. I want to circle back to the concepts we talked about at the very beginning. Hope is not a strategy. Don't rely on voters. 3 points. Don't rely on voters or the Congress or the Senate to bail you out or to save your assets, and control what you can control. If you don't take away any of the detail, that's okay. If you don't remember any of the numbers or the rules, that's okay. How on earth would you track all of that? Hope that this will all just work out is not a strategy, and the stakes are so high. So don't rely on third parties to bail you out when it comes to estate and gift taxes or other taxes, and control what you can. And we can be part of that. That point 3, control what you can control. Meet with us before these deadlines are approaching. Let's at least talk about it. For many clients, we meet with them and we say, look, here are a bunch of strategies. Let's talk about, you can weigh them, and then let's see what happens with the law. So we're kind of ready to go. But in 2011, I think it was, there was a deadline similar to this, where it looked like the estate tax, this is an important actually story. 2011, late in the year 2011, that's right, Mike, it was 2011.
Yeah.
It looked like the estate tax exemption was going to go from 5 million a person down to 1 million a person, barring a change in law. And I was not yet with our firm. I was still a management consultant, doing some acting, some different life. But our firm was booked up because that deadline was approaching. A lot of people thought, well, I'm about to lose this opportunity to protect 5 million for the rest of my life. And we had to turn clients away towards the end of that year because you need some time to do this. You can't just do this in a week. A lot of this stuff takes several weeks to do. We only have so many lawyers. We only have so much capacity. So we do anticipate a major surge. As it turned out, in January of 2012, Congress ended up extending the $5 million after the deadline passed. That can always happen too, right? We can't make guarantees. We might do all this planning maybe later, maybe in 5 years, laws change and it's no longer needed. But again, hope that happens is not a strategy. So don't rely on laws to change in a good way for your family. Take action now, like be ready to go. Maybe we get things ready to go and we don't use them if we don't need them. But if you don't take action ahead of time, you will lose this opportunity. So if you want to take action, we encourage you to do so, of course. So if you're an existing client, set a meeting with us. Just come in, let's set a meeting in the next few weeks or months. Let's make sure you're on top of this. If you want to stay in touch with us online, join our YouTube channel, subscribe. We have over 3,000 subscribers, growing every day, over a few 100,000 views. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm starting to post informational videos at instagram.com/Mark Gilfix. I'm just now getting into that. I realize I can reach a lot of fun people that way. And join our mailing list. Go to Gilfix.com. Just say I want to be added to your mailing list, and we'll make sure you're up to date on email. We'll email you with deadlines and talks. And of course, the most direct way you can take action is calling us. Set a meeting, or you can go to Gilfix.com or Gilfix.com. My needs to set a meeting. If you're an existing client, come back in. We can take a look at your situation in a new way. If you haven't worked with us yet, let's set a meeting. We can take a look at your core estate plan, your trust, power of attorney, advanced director, make sure the core stuff is there. So we need to make sure that foundation is strong so we're able to help you very efficiently next year. But we're here, contact us, let us know if we can help, set a meeting. And again, it's not just Mike and I. We have Francis LaPole, one of the best tax attorneys in the country, Nick Klingenberg, Renee Conrad, Amanda Nguyen. We have a Josh LaPole, recently joined our team. Francis's son, who's an awesome young attorney. So we have a team. It's not just us two. We have a whole support team. We want to be here for you and part of your family's team. So take action. Don't wait. Hope is not a strategy. Control what you can control. Let's not wait for these deadlines to come up. Contact us at Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. We're going to take some questions now. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet to our Gilfix Law YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a question. If you have questions for us, leave a question. We try to get back to as many of those as we can. Share this. If there's someone in your circle, for those of you watching live or on YouTube, share this. If it's your parents, your grandparents who need to see this, because you're the one who's going to get hit by these taxes, because really a lot of these are taxed when someone passes away. Share it. Share this video. We will be posting this on YouTube if you're not watching this on YouTube already. So we have a few questions. We're going to take just a couple, and then we're going to wrap things up. Mike, any thoughts before we get to questions?
No, I thought we'd go to the questions. They're good.
Mike, go on.
Well, what about charitable trusts? I mentioned charitable trusts. There are charitable remainder trusts. There's a number of approaches that can be taken with regard to charitable giving. The simplest estate tax avoidance plan under the sun says the maximum I can give to my kids, I give to my kids. Everything else, without estate tax exposure. Everything else goes to my favorite charities. We're setting up many family foundations these days so that the money stays under the control of the family, pursues and reinforces family values. So that's a very cool idea to think about in the context of charitable trusts. Let me go to what Paul asked.
Also charitable. Okay.
Well,
read the question.
That's a complicated question, charitable trusts. There's many, many different types of charitable trust, charitable lead trust, charitable unit trust, on and on. Paul raises a really good question. Just say, for clarification, if a couple has less than 13 million or a single person under 6 million, is there no need to take action for those estates? Well, you know, on estate tax, that's probably true unless there's a lot of growth in those assets. But you still need to, number one, be sure that you set up dynasty trust planning for the benefit of the kids to make sure that they get to enjoy those assets and not have everything they inherit be part of their taxable estates, protecting assets. Still, that got to talk about Proposition 19 if you have real property in California. So, you know, it isn't only about estate tax. That's just one of the issues that we're focusing on right now. So yeah, Mark, why don't you talk about the SALT deduction that
SALT. Oh yeah. So there's a question about the state and income, state and local tax deduction. So currently you can only deduct $10,000 of your state taxes against federal taxes. Previously, before the current law, you could have deducted all of them. So that's a huge hit for high earners in California. There's talks about adding that back in, letting you deduct your state and local taxes, but it's all up to Congress. So we don't know. Trump has talked about reinstating that, although his law was the one that limited those deductions. So it's like, I don't know, what would happen. But and Democrats talked about reinstating those because blue state Democrats were the ones kind of who had a lot of control after Biden was elected, and they did not reinstate the full ability to deduct local taxes, which also goes to why Prop 19 is so important. Prop 19 planning, because if your kids have $50,000 a year property taxes because you didn't protect them, they don't even get to deduct that against their federal taxes like they used to. They can only deduct 10,000 from it. So it makes that problem even more pronounced. We have a question from someone from Jill. Do you help people who are not super wealthy if it's just a manufactured home and CDs? Yes, we absolutely work with all types of families. We work with people, we've helped people who have hardly anything to deal with long-term care issues. We help many young families. I work with families in their late 20s who just had a kid to set up core estate plans. We make sure that the fee range is very wide. If we're doing very sophisticated tax planning, that's one realm. If it's core estate planning, our fees are very similar to many firms that don't have great experience. So talk to us, set a meeting. We'd always chat with you and see if we're a fit. But yes, we help all types of families of all backgrounds, not just high net worth. This talk was geared towards that. We help all types of families. There's a question about Fred, I'm sorry that your wife passed away and you filed a 706. Can you count on her exemption? So the exemption, when someone passes away, it's really important that you administer their estate properly. If you have a living trust, we routinely are called upon to do trust administrations. When one of our clients or their spouses passes away, work with lawyers. Don't do it yourself. Just don't. There's so many critical deadlines and issues. So if you filed, you can file for something called for portability. So as long as if a spouse passes away in the year where the exemption is, 13 million, you file for portability. Say, I don't need that now because I don't owe any estate taxes. I want to save it. So when I pass away, I get to use my exemption plus my spouse's higher exemption. So if you file in the right time, and there are deadlines for this, you should be able to preserve that spouse's higher exemption. But will that be honored in the future? Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, you have to make the election. I mean, just filing the 706 alone doesn't do it. Fair. It has to have the correct content. If the person who filed it was a CPA or attorney who knows what he or she is doing, they would have opted for portability. But so we can't make that an absolute yes. But probably you're fine on the assumption, again, that portability was elected when the 706 estate tax return was filed.
Yeah. So, I mean, always important, though, to work with experts when a loved one passes away. If you have assets, I mean, the stakes are so high. So, and it doesn't need to be done right away. You have a few months, but it's not indefinite. So I think that's good for questions. Oh, here's actually another question. Do we serve as successor trustee? Do we attorneys? So that's a complicated question. Occasionally we do, but we have to very much limit that. So if you're looking for, this is a different issue, we've had talks about this, but The role of successor trustee, who would step in for you if you can't manage your finances? That's a complicated one. We say look at family first. If you have trustworthy family members, maybe longtime trustworthy friends, then if you don't have that, you look to the world of professionals. There are professional fiduciaries, there are bank trust departments. We attorneys occasionally do service trustee, so it's very case by case. Occasionally we do service trustee. You typically need to get a certificate of independent review to talk to a third party. You need to do that. It's a thing. We occasionally do, but that's another discussion. So thank you for that question. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. I think to close here, again, I mean, I hammer these, but hope is not a strategy. Control what you can control. Don't wait to see what happens and hope that everything turns out well. We will know a lot more in early November. I mean, let's see how long it takes them to sort out the results. But at some point in November, we will know the outcome of this election, and we'll know with a lot more certainty what the likely outcomes will be. But we don't know how tax laws are going to change until they actually happen. But I think the most likely scenario right now is that we have this January 1st, 2026, or December 31st, 2025 cliff. So either way, if you have a larger estate, we need to start talking yet. You know, maybe you don't need to take action yet, but let's start exploring these issues so you can talk within your family and understand the different options for you. So contact us, gilfix.com, subscribe, like this video if you're seeing it on YouTube, share it. If there's anybody else you need to share this with, a parent or grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, share it with them. And let's not forget Prop 19. Let's protect your house. We've helped so many people with that. We can help you in an extraordinary way that I think we're the best in the state at doing it. So thank you so much, guys. I mean, that was a lot. And we had still most people are here. That's great. You guys stuck around to the end. We will be doing more webinars and seminars on this. Spread the word. Subscribe to our channel too. We're going to put a lot more content about this. We'll be doing more talks about this, maybe some in-person talks right after the election once we know more. So stay tuned for that. But thank you guys so much. I hope you got a lot out of this. And regardless, hope everybody out there is, as my mom likes to say, safe, sane, and healthy. Stay healthy, everybody. And thank you so much for spending some of your time with us.
Take care.